Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fenske. We all know bees are an essential part of the ecosystem, and we probably all know enough to be vaguely concerned about their welfare. But what can we do to help the bees? Well, my guest today has some ideas for that. Nicole Miller-Struttmann is a biology professor at Webster University, and in conjunction with a colleague at St. Louis University, she's launching a product powered by citizen scientists and their cameras. She calls it Shutterbee, and the goal is to train you, yes you, to become a better backyard naturalist, tracking the bees in your very own yard. And if that sounds appealing to you, well, she is with us now to talk about it. Nicole Miller-Struttmann, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what are you hoping to learn through this Shutterbee project?
We have a few key things that we're trying to figure out. One, what is the bee diversity like in the city going from the suburban environment into the urban environment? And if we have enough interest, even potentially in rural environments as well, so that we can get a sense for where the bee diversity is and what people are doing at those given locations to support higher bee diversity. And then another facet of it is to understand the behavior of the bees and whether or not they're foraging on different plants or if they're foraging differently. And what I mean by that is, are they visiting more flowers or fewer flowers? Do they need to sort of branch out in order to get the resources that they need? Those are really our two main questions. And then, of course, it's also about creating dialogue between people who are on the ground working in their backyards to the scientists who are doing conservation research.
So it sounds great, and yet when I think about trying to answer those questions in my own backyard, it seems overwhelming. You kind of see a bee flit by, and you don't think about where it's going or what plants it's around. How are you going to have these citizen naturalists figure out how to actually make a valuable contribution here?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the big things about these kinds of questions is having lots of locations and having lots of variation. So everybody's backyard, just by understanding what's in your individual backyard doesn't tell us what's happening on the grand scale. But when we have lots of people who are involved, then we can get some really meaningful information. And what we're asking folks to do is go through some trainings with us, learn a little bit more about bee photography and the bees in their backyard, and then conduct bi-weekly surveys where they go out and they walk the same transects every week in their yard and take pictures of bees.
And when you say bee photography, I mean, are you talking about we need a fancy camera to do this?
No, absolutely not. You can take great photos. And by great photos, I don't mean the most glorious picture of, some with a magnificent macro lens that's going to be, put on my wall at home or something. What I mean is something that is identifiable so that we can get the bee at the right angle in order to tell what group it is in. And we have some tricks of the trade to help people with that because bees are flying all the time. So it's kind of hard to get them.
They're not just sitting there waiting to be photographed.
No, if only, right? No, but the great thing about, or one of the great things about having technology at our fingertips is that it's really come a long way, and you can do cool things like on iPhones. You can use the live function, and that was really helpful. It essentially takes a short video, or you can do burst functions where you take a bunch of different pictures at once, and usually one of them is at the right sort of angle or in focus more than others, and that can be the one that you choose to submit.
So when you're talking about this training you're going to do, it's going to be focused on tips like that?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Tips like that.
This is somewhat basic stuff by design.
Oh, yeah. No, it's meant to be something that absolutely anybody can do with a little bit of practice. And, that's the joy of it. That's the fun. People are the experts of what's going on in their backyard. They're the ones hanging out there all the time. And this is a way for us to have that conversation.
And if you're listening to this conversation, we want to invite you to join us. If you have a question about bee diversity or bee behavior you've observed around home, we have a bee expert right here on the phone with us. You can give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK. Or you can send us a tweet at STL on air or email us at talk@stlpublicradio.org. Nicole, I know some of our listeners might be in apartment-type situations or have those tiny little city postage stamps size lots. If someone doesn't have the luxury of a backyard of their own, can they still help with this?
Yes, absolutely. If you are interested in being involved, we can work with you to find a local either park or community garden, or probably individual balconies are a little bit too small, but we can certainly try to work with you to find other locations that are close by, accessible for you to track bees there. And that would be fantastic, because that would help us understand not only what's going on in people's yards, but the broader insect community.
So ideally, you're going to get a whole ton of data from this. What happens to it after you get all these kind of badly framed bee photos that we're going to be taking for you?
All kinds of things. Well, so for one thing, they first get uploaded. So the participants will upload the photographs to iNaturalist, which is this amazing app that you can use just for the heck of it, even if just for fun. Even if you're not on a program like ours, you can learn about beetles in your backyard. Take a picture, upload it, see what it is identified as, and experts are on there all the time identifying all kinds of things. So what we'll do then with those photos is we help to identify them, and then we help to identify what plants they're on. Now, a lot of our participants might know the plants in their backyard really well. So we're actually asking people to, if they know the plant, put the plant name in there. And that's where we're getting that visitation information. Then what we can do is we have all of this information embedded in those photographs. So we have the bee species, we have the plant species, we have the location, and we have the date that it was collected. Those are all super meaningful pieces of information. And then what we do is we download that whole data set and we start to tease apart, okay, what do we know about these people's backyards? How many plant species do they have? What are they surrounded by? Are there a lot of concrete in the area, or do they have forest nearby? And we can tell all of that from remote sense data, or most of that from remote sense data.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so the idea here, I understand this isn't just, one professor's passion project. You're working with St. Louis University. I guess the St. Louis Zoo is even a part of this.
Yeah. So we've been. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I was just going to ask, what do you hope will come out of all this information you're going to gather, what you're going to learn about what plants they like and how they feel about concrete?
Right. Well, yeah. Generally speaking, they don't love concrete. I'll throw that out there to anthropomorphize our little bees. But, one of the main things we want to gain, I gave you the really detailed sort of 3-point, these are the specific things that we're really wanting to learn. But overall, what we want to do is understand what helps support these things. What can we do in our backyards to actively support bees? And then we can give a lot more detailed recommendations to folks about okay, you need to have this kind of diversity of plants in your yard. Or if you're in an area where you are surrounded by a lot of woodland, maybe you don't need to worry about having as much nesting area, but you really need to make sure you have a lot of flower density. Because nesting, it's increasingly clear that nesting is really important. So going back to this idea about concrete, in urban environments, we actually have pretty decent diversity, especially in St. Louis, for bees. But we tend to have fewer ground nesting bees. So those are some of the additional pieces of information that we can get.
Okay. So overall, for those of us who don't pay that much attention to science, it seems like there's this vague sense that the bees are all in terrible trouble and they may be going extinct immediately. And this is something we should worry about, but we don't know quite why. I understand you've kind of taken the position that a lot of that is hyperbole, yet there's some real concerns here. What is the outlook for bees?
Yeah, we have reason to be concerned. We absolutely have reason to be concerned. Whether or not all insects are going to go extinct, that's unlikely, but that's not the point. The point is that we're seeing declines that are scary, and they're scary for farmers. They're scary for biologists, ecologists, conservation biologists, and that's because these species, they perform what we call ecosystem services, and pollination is just one type that bees contribute too, but there's also things like aerating the soil and decomposition. I mean, these organisms are really important. And so I like to be a little bit careful about having too much fear mongering while at the same time saying, these are really important, then we should be thinking and doing things about it.
So with, these concerns about the overall bee population, I'm sure that books have been written on this, but what are some of the short reasons that they are in such trouble?
So one of the things that we have learned over the last couple decades is that there isn't really a simple one target issue. When there's no silver bullet, as they say, or smoking gun. I don't know, one of those. But it's a combination of things. So lack of floral resources is definitely a big one. So not having flowers throughout the entire year, because different species are active at different times of the year. Some species are active all year. So that's a big one. Nesting sites is we're finding having more and more support for that. That nesting sites are lacking for a lot of species, particularly in urban environments, particularly for ground nesting. Chemicals, pesticides are pretty nasty. We don't have a specific chemical that just targets your pest insects. They influence all of them, and once it's in the system, it goes from one trophic level to another trophic level, so then it ends up influencing birds as well, and other species that rely on insects. Diseases are also increasingly important. This is something that is, depending on where you are, more or less important, but we have certainly pathogens that are influencing for bumblebees. We think pathogens are an important aspect of declines, for example. So
a whole toxic mess there.
Yeah, a whole toxic mess. And that's where understanding how we can take targeted approaches, but also general approaches of just beefing up the total abundances so that they can handle these stressors. Because the bigger the populations are, the more they can weather these challenges.
We're talking to Nicole Miller-Struttmann. She's a biology professor at Webster University, a bee expert, and one of the professors who's launching the Shutterbee project here in St. Louis. Nicole, I've got to ask, and I know you earlier used the term fear-mongering, and I'm afraid I'm about to really indulge in it, but I keep hearing about these murder hornets. Should we be freaking out about the murder hornets?
No.
Thank you. That's the answer I was hoping. But why not? I mean, they sound terrible. Right.
Well, they sound scary because of the way that they're made out, right? But predators, any kind of predator can be made to be scary, but they are hornets in general. The Asian hornet is one that is not native, and that one poses some potential to be a pest, particularly in agricultural settings. So there is reason to be concerned if you live in areas where a couple colonies have been found. They've all been eradicated, and this is all in either Washington State or in Canada. They have only been found a couple places, and they don't generally, just like most wasps and bees, they do not attack people, which is what the murder hornet sort of implies. And they get the name because they do feed they will kill adult bees by decapitating them and then feeding them to their young, which sounds gruesome. Yes. But that's also just part of their biology. They're predators. They eat other organisms. So we don't have them here in the Midwest. They haven't been found here at all. Any hornet or hornet-looking thing is going to be something that has been here for a long period of time and isn't a threat to you or to anybody else. So it's best just to let them be.
Okay, I feel much better knowing that. So thank you. I'm going to go back to fearing the coronavirus and not the murder hornets. I do want to go to the phone lines. We have a couple callers, and hopefully we can get to a few of them. We'll see. Louise is calling from St. Louis with a question for you. Louise, hi, you're on St. Louis on the air.
Thank you. My question is, I would really like to have a beehive in my backyard to support the bee population in the city. How do I do that?
That's a great question. Nicole, if somebody doesn't have a beehive and they want one, what would be the first step?
Well, there's two prongs to that question, and I hate to burst bubbles because people are so enthusiastic, but getting beehives does not help bees. Beehives, honeybees, are kind of like chickens. They're bred for a very particular purpose. And if you want to have honey and you want to, have that in your yard, or, observe these bees in your yard and take care of them, you can absolutely do that. And that's something that has a unique purpose. But if you're doing it to help the bees, having honeybee hives is actually not helpful. And they can compete with wild bees. And I get this question a lot, and there's so much enthusiasm and so much care that I always want to stress that this is, I know that everybody's heart's in the right place, but it's a misconception about what role honeybees really play in our natural environment.
Boy, that is great to know. I had no idea. And Louise, I hope that's helpful as you're figuring out how to help with this problem. Thank you for that good intention. Don is calling from Baldwin. Hi, Don. You're on St. Louis on the Air.
Hello. I had a comment and a question concerning honeysuckle and clover. And I'll make a statement in that 50 years ago, when the house was put here in the subdivision in West County, St. Louis, honeysuckle was fairly pervasive. And I noticed 10 years ago that the honeysuckle always came out and smelled very sweet. Fast forward until now, the honeysuckle has no smell at all, and there are no bees that hang around it at all, which makes me wonder. Secondly, more people have decided they like to spend for commercial fertilizing, so they're fertilizing their lawns, which is killing the clover off. So I never see any bees hardly at all in the clover. These have been changes that seem scary to me, and I was wondering what you all might say in regard to that.
Thank you for that, Don. Nicole, any thoughts on either of those points?
Yeah, those are great observations. So I'll take them in reverse order. The clovers are really they're actually really great they're not native. They are Eurasian, and primarily the cultivars that we have are from Europe, and but they're not invasive, and they can actually they produce nitrogen and they release it into the soil. They fix it and release it into the soil, so they're actually pretty decent for the soil, and they are good for bees. Bees love them. So the focus on having these lawn-style grasses has reduced some of these other floral resources, whether or not they're native for native bees. So that's an important observation that he made, and that's really interesting. The honeysuckle, I am not as familiar with recent evolution in honeysuckle and whether or not it is getting less sweet or producing less nectar. It might just be variation in individuals. These things live for a long period of time. So over the past 10 years, those individuals have aged, but you probably haven't seen any major turnovers in evolution, although you'd really have to talk to a Lonicera specialist. So Lonicera is the genus that species comes from. But that is really interesting because you're right, that kind of smell and attractants are what would bring a pollinator to them.
Okay. And we have just so many people wanting to join this conversation. Unfortunately, we are out of time on this today. And it makes me happy to know so many people care about the bees. We did have a question that came in over email. And Nicole, this would be great for you to address. Ellen asks, regarding the training for citizen bee scientists, will the training be done remotely due to the social distancing restrictions?
Yes, absolutely. It will be done remotely. We were hoping at some point to do site visits, but we're strictly sticking to remote for now. So everything will be done virtually. We'll have 2 trainings that are sort of meeting style trainings, and then we'll have several follow-up email correspondence about how things are going in people's yards.
Okay, and we're going to get all that information on our website for people who want to join in. That's stlpublicradio.org. You can find out how to participate in the Shutterbee project and channel all your love of and wanting to help the bees into this very useful project. So, Nicole Miller-Struttmann, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Nicole, again, is a biology professor at Webster University. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.